think about our mindset when it comes to other people. Are we a renter or an investor? Let's talk about that. Welcome to For One Another. I'm Robin. Today we're going to talk about investments. In this channel, our goal is to help you relate to other people in a way that's mutually beneficial because we believe we are relational creatures. Well, one thing we can do is think about our mindset when it comes to other people. Are we a renter or an investor? Let's talk about that. A renter is someone who sees things as temporary, short-term, someone who is always looking at the next place to rent. So I'm not really settling into this one. A renter type person, whether we're talking about in a workplace or in a relationship, is usually looking to give the minimum compliance. What are the minimum rules that I need to adhere to stay here as long as I want to, and I don't want to give above those. Usually a renter type is going to be repelled by someone who wants to be an investor or an owner, who wants a longer term relationship. Because a renter is looking to reduce his or her investments into a group, into a person, into a relationship, a company, a country, maybe the planet even. What's the least I can put into this to get something I'm trying to get out of it in the short term and then get out of it? That a renter generally holds the attitude of, what do I care what happens to this person or this child or this company once I move on? Who cares? I'll be over there. That's a renter mindset. The Bible calls for an ownership mindset, an investor mindset. When we enter relationships or when we go to a workplace or we have children, the Bible calls us to consider ourselves stewards of those things and work for those relationships as though we're working for the Lord because we're representing Him there. He wants us to take ownership. That looks like wanting something that will last. How can I make this thing, this workplace, this group, this person who I'm in a relationship with, this community, this child who I have been a part of creating, how can I raise the value of that because of my involvement? I want to invest into this person and this relationship. An investor or an owner tends to put aside short-term wants for long-term investments because he or she knows that the more I put into this, the better it will be. An owner values sweat equity. He or she knows you have to work at these things. This isn't going to be instant. Whether we're talking about a person-to-person relationship, health goals, work goals, I need to work at this. If it's a work goal, I need to start with school. I need to do really well in my classes and invest as much as I can into the skills that I want to build. And then I start my career and I begin to work my way up in the direction I'm wanting to go. And it's going to take time. It's going to take years of investment. The same thing in health goals. I can't just drink a drink and boom, I'm perfect and I'm exactly as healthy as I want to be. I have to take it one day at a time and investing. I'm taking an ownership over my own health. In a relationship, it's the same thing. When I meet someone and I want to enter a relationship, I'm going to have to sweat. I'm going to have to work. I'm going to have to learn who they are and determine what are our strengths and weaknesses together and how can we make each other better together than we were alone. That takes time. That takes investment. An owner kind of person is going to want to do that. And generally speaking, an owner tends to seek out relationships with other owners, someone else who is an investor. An owner doesn't want to have a relationship with a renter because if I'm in something for the long term, then I don't want to be putting my trust into someone who isn't. Now, you and I can guarantee that when we go through life, other people are watching us and they're assessing whether or not we look like owners. Employers, for example, they want to hire or promote owners people who have a track record of owning their work. That's why we have to show our job history whenever we apply for a job. We can complain that a company won't look past our job record to see the real us, and probably that won't get us anywhere. Or we can do the work of building a track record that we can be proud of and that a company would look at and say, yes, I would like to have you with us. I had recently a situation where I was looking to hire a role within my organization. One of the applicants had 6 jobs in a year. Well, the people on my team who I was going to have this person join each have 6 or more years into this one role. And so that would have been a huge risk for me to bring someone in who has no track record of faithfulness to a team or an organization into a group that has a strong camaraderie and has a strong sense of loyalty for one another. So it's something to consider. We want to build up some responsibilities and show ourselves good stewards of whatever role we do get, so that future employers will look at that and say, yes, I want someone like that on my team. Banks, they give better loans to those who build up credit. We build credit by owning smaller things over a long term to show that we can own bigger things. When I bought my first car, my parents, they did a co-signing for me, but they did that and it was a used car. It was just a few $1,000s. They did that so that I could build up that opportunity to earn some credit, so that when I bought my next car, which was a few years later, which was more expensive, I had something to show I am a good debt risk. You can take a chance giving me a little bit more this time than I asked for last time. So banks are a good example. Bank loans are an example of looking for people who've built up credit. As a rule, we don't build up credit by renting. I'm going to talk about literal apartment renting in just a minute, but as a mindset, if we're always short-term based, we're never settling, we're never investing into, that's not going to build us credit in the eyes of creditors. Let's talk about relationships. In relationships, renting not only doesn't build credit, it creates negative credit. Here's what I mean. We can lament if we have had in recent years a history of many very short relationships. We're constantly in and out of them. Or maybe we're not even in relationships at all. We just end up spending the night with people and things like that. If we suddenly see someone who we really would like to have a long relationship with, but they don't show interest in us, we can lament and say, well, that's not fair. They should give me a chance. They should look through all of those things. Or we can realize that they wouldn't have any reason to believe that we would be trustworthy in a long relationship with them. So we can begin to do the work instead of building ourselves up a new reputation, one that will be attractive to someone in that position. And it won't be a immediate thing. We can't just say, okay, I'm going to change my lifestyle and expect that someone will be immediately attracted to us. We're going to have to show over the long term that we know how to invest into a relationship and that we're a trustworthy partner. I'll give you 2 examples of that. One is a story that I was part of. The story I heard is there was a young woman, and the story I'm part of was a young man, so I'm giving both sides. A young woman who had a long history of short relationships with men and many no relationships, just sleeping with them. And she wanted to change her life. She went to church, saw immediately a young man who she was attracted to. He really seemed to have it all together, and he was super kind, and she tried to get his attention, but he wouldn't give her any attention. And she told her mother about it later on. She said, I don't understand. It's totally unfair. I decided to turn my life around, and here it is. I've met this person, and he's not giving me any attention. And her mother said, honey, I love you, so I'm going to tell you the truth. The kind of person you're looking for right now is not looking for you. You're going to have to change who you are fundamentally. Show yourself a good steward of relationships before someone like that will be looking for you. The good news is this young woman took that to heart, and she did that. She began to make fundamental changes in all areas of her life to show herself as an investor. And she did end up getting the attention of a man who was much like the one that she was lamenting about. And they got married, and they've been married for a long time now. Now, here's the story I know personally. I had a friend who used to have very short relationships with women. And one day he ran into a young woman who he said, wow, she blows me away. I'd like to marry her. Well, they were in a relationship. She gave him that much, but she wouldn't marry him. When he decided to take it to that next level, and the more she got to know him, she got to have concerns about him and his history, and he asked her to marry him, and she wouldn't marry him. And she said, it's because I'm suddenly realizing that you have the kind of history that I'm not looking to build on, and I haven't seen any indications that you're changing that. So I don't know that I could trust you in a marriage. So he talked to me about that, and he knew I was a Christian, by the way, and he was not a Christian. And we talked about longer term commitments, and he said, well, I tell you what, I want you to pray to your God, and I want him to change her mind so that she'll marry me. If he does that, I'll believe in him. Well, he didn't do that. In fact, probably he protected her so that she would not enter into a relationship with my friend who'd simply mistreat her and use her the way he had so many other people, and himself with her. God needed my friend to change his life so that he would be ready to marry someone who was looking for an investment down the road. And the good news is that happened later on. My friend did marry someone years later after working through these things and becoming an investor. Now, the Bible is all about investors. Listen to a few verses that just show that to be true. First of all, there's the overall verse. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have managed a few things faithfully. I will now give you more things to manage. That's Jesus in Matthew 25:23, talking about an investment mindset. How about with our bodies? God wants us to invest and own our bodies. 1 Corinthians 6:19. Your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, who you received from God. You are not your own. You were bought at a price. Therefore, honor God with your body. How about sexuality? The Bible talks to that also. Flee from sexual immorality, which the Bible defines as sex outside of marriage. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but a sexually immoral person sins against his or her own body. 1 Corinthians 6:18. How about work? The Bible talks about work also. Whoever works will have plenty of bread, but someone who is lazy and follows worthless pursuits lacks sense. Proverbs 12:11. The Bible talks about community. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Galatians 6:2. Investing into the communities we live in. The Bible has a lot to say about marriage. A man and woman shall leave their parents, hold fast to one another, and the two shall become one flesh in marriage. They are no longer two, but one. What therefore God joined together, no one should break. That's Jesus. Matthew 19:5 and 6. Marriage should also be honored by everyone who sees a couple and the couple within it. Let marriage be held in honor by the couple and all who see them, and let their marriage bed be undefiled by anyone. God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous. Hebrews 13:4. The Bible speaks about investing into the children who we create. Train up your children in the way they should go. When they are older, they will not depart. Proverbs 22:6. The only way we can train our children is to be there as they grow up. And in fact, if you were to go on and read the rest of that proverb, it says, children are a heritage from the Lord. They are like arrows in a parent's quiver. Our children pass on our influence into the world. They go places we don't. So the investment that we make into them has huge value. So invest into your children. The Bible commends one another living, loving others as ourselves. That means investing into our work, our homes, and our relationships as though the other people in them are equally as important as we are. Because they are. Because according to God, we are all created equally in His image. We're all creations of God, all brothers and sisters. So everywhere we go, we should, if we want to do it God's way, have an investment mindset. And God promises if we will do that, He'll guide us and He'll help us. What a good promise. Now let me quickly end on something that I don't mean when I say renter mindset. I don't mean a person who has to rent an apartment. I rented for a couple years when I was in college and just coming out of college. My wife and I rented an apartment for a year when we first got married. That's normal. We're talking about people who choose short-term gains. Hey, maybe I can get that person to go to bed with me. Maybe I can take a shortcut and get over that person in my job. Maybe I can get by with doing the least in my work and still get paid because I don't really care what happens to this company. That's what we're talking about when we talk about a renter mindset. We can also lose our investment mindset over time, even if we've become the leader or we've become a governor of an institution. We can forget that we're investors. Here's a good way to recognize someone who has forgotten that. If we're looking at that, if we're looking to go to a company or we're looking to invest ourselves into an organization or a partnership, what do they look like? Are they renters or owners? Do they treat their employees well long term? Do they treat people in their relationships well? Do they govern well if I want to move to a particular state or country? That kind of thing. Here's one thing we can look at. Do they make long-term choices that would be beneficial to the people they're leading? Governors, do they make policies that make sense long-term, or do they make ones that benefit them over the short term, even though they'll cause lots of trouble down the road? Am I going to bankrupt a community to get a huge house now because I really don't care what happens to them down the road? Am I going to buy votes by making promises to hand out everything to everybody, knowing that if I did that, it would sink the whole country? Wisdom says, don't support or enter relationships with people who are renters in their mindset, but do associate yourself with those who are owners, who are investors. So here's a good question to end on. What is one area in my life where I can make more of an investment of ownership, where I can become a larger owner or investor? Is it in my workplace? Can I give a little bit more of myself into that role? Not even just to serve the person who is over me there, but to serve in the Lord's name, because God led me to that job and I can pour my best into it and help that company or that organization because they chose me instead of someone else. In a relationship, can I serve better into that relationship? Can I take more ownership of what happens in that relationship over the long term by really investing myself into it, by saying I'm committed to this relationship? That's a good challenge for all of us. Something to think about as we live for one another in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. See you soon.